everybody, this is a overview on your Zoll Crash Cart biphasic defibrillator that the hospital is currently standardized to. The first thing that you will see on this defibrillator is we actually need it plugged into a set of pads. Every night at midnight, the defib is going to wake itself up and run through a 50+ point self-test. It's going to test the expiration dates on the electrodes. It will test the battery to ensure it has enough monitoring time for 1 hour, and it could deliver 10 shocks at the maximum energy settings. And it will test a number of other components. Depending upon pass-fail, you will get either a red X or a green check mark in the top of the device. If you have a red X, you can still use that defibrillator on the code. You just need to call for a backup so that you can switch them out. But at minimum, you can at least get the code started with the defib that you have. It could have failed because it tests the expiration dates on the electrodes, and if they are expired, it will fail for that reason. So when you go to open up the electrodes are going to look a little different than what you've seen if you've been at other hospitals that did not use Zoll. When you need to use these electrodes, simply pull out this cable, and the 8-foot cable will come out without any knots or kinks in it. If and when you ever need to disconnect from the pads, there's an unlock section on the pad and the cable that if you press on the back of this, the cables and the pads pull right apart. If you need to put them back together, it goes one way, just like a child's toy where it only fits together one way. If it's upside down, there will be a ridge right here that will prevent it from going together, and you're going to have these large ports sticking out. So when you go to open up the pads, we say that you want to grab them by the yellow arrows, and when you rip these pads open, you're going to have two pads, a front and back pad. So Zoll's recommendation is that you put the back pad on first, labeled number 1, and you put the front pad on second, labeled number 2. Reason being, if you have a female patient with breast tissue or a large man, and you go to roll them over to put, you've already got the front pad on, it could cause their chest to pucker, and put an air bubble between the pad and the patient. So we recommend that you minimize touching the back of the pad by removing this from the backing by these red tabs. Pull this on, shows you proper patient placement just to the left of the spine, under the scapula. Put it on one edge of your patient, and then smooth it on as best you can to minimize any air bubbles. Your front pad is going to have a CPR puck or sensor here. You're going to place this sensor right where chest compressions are going to be performed. Let the rest of the electrode fall into place and then smooth it on so you basically salvage the heart. So your nurses are actually going to do chest compressions on this crosshair right here, and it will real time, and I'll show you in a minute, on the front of the device show you your rate, your depth, and if you're allowing for full patient recoil while you're giving somebody CPR. On the back of the adult pads, your pacing and or monitoring leads are built in, so you no longer need to apply a separate 3-lead if you have to emergently pace your patient or for monitoring capabilities. They're all built into the adult pads already. For the pediatric pads, we also have a sensor now that will coach you on the quality of chest compressions you're giving a kid. So there's actually a sensor on the front pad and on the back pad. So when you're doing CPR on a child, these two sensors are looking for each other, so it's important that you do an AP pad placement for a child. We ran out of room for the pediatric pads for the pacing leads, so when you need to pace a kid, you're still going to need to apply your ECG leads like you historically have. If an anterior posterior pad placement will not fit for your adult patient, you can do an anterior lateral pad placement and drop your front pad to the side here. Bring your back pad up to the front so you have an anterior lateral pad placement. You're obviously not going to do chest compressions down here on the ribs. So what you can actually do, you can see this sensor here is perforated. You can actually tear this sensor away, and it still has adhesive on it, so you can put the sensor where you're going to do chest compression, so you can have an anterior lateral pad placement, and still have your sensor where you're going to do CPR, so you can get all your CPR coaching on the front of the monitor. So to get in a little bit about the operating system on the Zoll defib, the first time somebody showed it to me, they color-coded it to help simplify how to drive it. So in the middle of this defib, you've got one black knob that drives all functionality. If you turn the center knob to the gray area, it unlocks all of your monitoring keys. If you turn it to the red, this is how we would defibrillate or cardiovert. If we turn it to the green, this is how we would pace. So if your nurses can remember gray monitor, red defib, and green is pacing, it helps to kind of compartmentalize how to drive the defibrillator. So when you turn the defib on, simply turn it on monitor mode. It will power up down here on the bottom and tell you it's in monitor mode right now. It's taking the ECG through the pad sets. So if you hit the lead select button, it goes to lead 1. Click it again, it goes to lead 2. Again to lead 3. and then the last time we'll take it back to the pads. If you click the size button, it will take your amplitude from a 1 to a 1.5. You'll see your QRS start to get larger, especially if I click it again, it goes to a 2. Click it again, we're now on a 3, and you can see it's very large now. One more time, and it's now a 0.5, so we have a small complex. Click it one more time, you're back to a 1. Alarm suspend will turn your alarms on or off. Your devices are configured to power up with all of your alarms off. So you'll know they're off because there's a little bell with an X going through it right here. So when you click the alarm suspend button one time, all of your alarms are now active, and this is what you're going to hear. If you give this a quick tap, it will give you a few seconds to try to re-put the SpO2 probe or whatever was wrong back on the patient. But if it's an arrhythmia alarm, it will turn back on and tell you to check patient. To turn your alarms off permanently, you press and hold this button for 4 seconds until that bell stops flashing. Now all of your alarms are back off again. Recorder will start and stop your printer. So the recorder for the device is located on top of the defib. So when you hit the recorder button, it will print out a baseline for you if you need one. Every time you defibrillate a patient on a Zoll, it will automatically print out a strip that will show you 6 seconds pre-shock. It will show the shock, then 9 seconds post-shock. So if you just hit the recorder one time, though, it will keep printing until you either run out of paper or until you hit the recorder button again. So that was monitoring in a nutshell. To go over defibrillation, step 1 for an ACLS nurse is to hit the energy select button. It will automatically choose 120 joules, which is the first shock protocol on the Zoll. It will automatically jump up to 150 joules on the second shock, and then jump to 200 joules on the third shock. So step 1 is just turning it to energy select. You do not need to change the energy levels at all. Step 2 is charge if you're an ACLS nurse. And then when it's ready, step 3 is just to hit shock. And then it will automatically jump up the energy for you to 150 joules on the second shock. If you're a BLS nurse, you would just turn it on, and then step 2, instead of hitting charge, would be to hit analyze.
Stand clear.
And the defib will basically walk you through what you need to do. If it's a shockable rhythm, you'll hear it charge up. It will tell you then.
Press shock.
When you hit the shock button,
Perform CPR.
it will now tell your nurse to perform CPR. You're also going to have a little CPR countdown clock in the bottom right-hand side of the screen that shows a 2-minute countdown. So if you and another nurse are working on a patient and he or she's about to pass out because they ran out of air or they're getting poor CPR, you can ask them to switch or just coach them how much time they have left. If you want to change the energies up or down, you can hit the energy select button up or down, and right here on the front of the device, it will take you from 1 to 200 joules. If you change the energy levels, it will take it out of the auto increment mode though, so you then have to choose your next shock energy level. So to get in a little bit about the CPR components and what these pads now do. When I start to give my patient CPR on my sensor, up here in purple, it's going to show you my actual rate, my actual depth. There's a bar that says release. So the goal is to keep that bar solid purple. That's showing you you're allowing for full patient recoil. And then there's a diamond that says PPI, so that's pressure perfusion index. That's basically coronary perfusion pressure based on good rate and good depth. So as I start to give CPR, you'll see on the top of the defib real time my depth, my rate, and then my release bar. Everything stays purple. My coronary perfusion pressure, or my PPI diamond, is filled up, so it's showing you that I'm getting good CPD based on my rate and depth, but now I'm tired. So my depth is good, but my rate is not where it needs to be. So it will give you audible and visual coaching that you need to change something. So when you resume, you get a compliment because you're doing a good job. So you now real time have rate, depth. For release, if you have a nurse who's leaning on the patient's chest and not allowing for full recoil, that bar is only going to be partially filled. So as you're giving CPR, if you have a nurse who's only letting the bar partially fill up, it will often tell you to push harder because the accelerometer in here is looking for 2 inches of travel on your patient.
Stand clear.
So at the end of your 2-minute cycle, if you hit analyze, it automatically will do an analysis for you and then charge up
Press shock.
if you'd like it to, okay? So I'm just going to take it out of AED real quickly. The last thing that the defib has the ability to do is to show your nurses the patient's underlying rhythm while CPR is in progress. So if you look at the front of the screen here, I have 2 waveforms. The top one says ECG. The bottom line says FIL, stands for filter. So I'm pushing VF, an artifact from chest compressions, on these two waveforms right here. If you watch the bottom waveform while you're giving somebody CPR, the bottom waveform filters out my artifact from chest compression so you can see that underlying rhythm on compressions are in progress. So if you're a minute and a half into this, that looks shockable. You can actually go ahead and charge the defib. 3, 2, 1. Your 2 minutes is up. You come off. You need to verify the rhythm for at least 5 seconds, and you have an idle timer that tells you how long it's been. You've already cleared the bed, confirmed it's shockable, hit the shock button, resume your next 2-minute cycle of CPR, and you're right at that 10-second window, exactly like American Heart is asking you to be. So to get into how to cardiovert a patient on your Zols, if you look at the front of the screen, on the bottom right here, you'll have your sync button. It's highlighted in white. So these soft keys down here today, we're not really going to go over except for really this one soft key, which is your sync button. So the defib is not touchscreen, won't change anything hitting the screen. But when you hit the sync button, it's now going to tell you that you're synced, and you're going to have a little white marker up here on top of your R wave. So when you're ready, you can choose your energy setting that the clinician wants you to, charge, and then once it's ready, you press and hold so it delivers the therapy on the R wave. It shows you defibrillated the patient. It now takes it out of sync and puts it back into defib mode. So it no longer says sync down here, and then there's no longer a white marker on top of the R wave. So if you have to cardiovert your patient again, you just have to resync the device. To get into pacing on the R series, you've got your center knob that you're going to want to turn down to pace. If you have the Zoll pads in an AP position on your patient, so if you have the pads here and on their back, like we originally instructed, you do not need to apply 3 leads. They already have the 3 leads integrated in. If you change the pad placement to an anterior lateral pad placement, then you will need to add separate 3 leads, which I'll show you at the end of this, how to change the 3 leads on the back of it. So if you look at the front, it tells you you're in pace mode now. You've got 0 MAs, and your MAs correlates with your output or MA knob on the left-hand side. Your rate or PPM knob on the right correlates with your PPM number on the right-hand side. So one of the nice things about a Zoll pacer is a downward deflected pacer spike, so it's easier to delineate between the pacer spike and the patient's complex. So when you're ready, you just start to increase your milliamps here until you see that downward deflected pacer spike followed by a widened QRS showing electrical capture. So American Heart's recommendation is to find your minimum threshold, confirm by checking a pulse, and increase it by 10%. So you can bump it up here a few milliamps, so you've got some wiggle room. You've got your patient's pace rate up here in the upper right-hand side. If this was in monitor mode, this would just be your patient's heart rate. There's also this small 4-to-1 button down here on the bottom. So if you press and hold the 4-to-1 button and watch your patient's heart rate here, what this is actually doing is suppressing 3 of 4 pace beats so you can see their intrinsic rhythm without losing capture. So you can see, probably still need to pace this guy, so when you let go, it resumes pacing at a set rate and you never lost capture on that patient. So that's the general overview on how to drive the defibrillator. All the defibrillators also have a number of parameters on them as well.